Welcome to the Vault of Tales, a treasure trove of science fiction stories. The Crimson Planet. The sky over Orion 9 was never blue. It blazed a strange crimson-orange hue, as if the entire planet drowned in an eternal sunset. That was the work of the magnetic dust ring, a colossal band of charged particles, orbiting high above, casting eerie, shimmering beams onto the surface below. Kevin Varin peered through the shuttle's viewport, his eyes narrowing against the blinding glare. A long scar traced his left cheek, a memento from an engine explosion years back, twitching faintly as he muttered under his breath. "This place doesn't exactly scream, rest stop." He was an electronics engineer with the Galactic Coalition, a man hardened by tough gigs across the stars. But Orion 9, this was uncharted territory for him. The mission sounded simple enough: patch up the power grid of an old, abandoned outpost, forsaken for over a decade. A cakewalk, he figured. A few hours of splicing wires and testing circuits, and he'd be off this godforsaken rock before the sun dipped, if you could call that fiery orb a sun. The universe, though, had other plans. As his shuttle touched down, on a cracked, arid plain, red dust billowed up in thick clouds, swallowing his view. Kevin activated his envirosuit, a sleek, lightweight rig, with an integrated AI named Sparky. A clunky startup chime crackled in his earpiece. "Welcome to Orion 9, boss," Sparky's voice buzzed, glitchy and uneven. "Temperature, 42 degrees Celsius, humidity, next to nil. Survival odds, 87%, wait, maybe 42%. Hard to say, my sensors are a bit fritzy." Kevin sighed. "Thanks for the optimism, Sparky. Now shut it and let me work." He stepped out, hefting a heavy toolbox. The outpost loomed ahead, a squat grey relic caked in dust and rust. Shattered solar panels jutted out like broken bones, cables dangling like the veins of a long-dead beast. Kevin shook his head. This should have been a 2-hour job, 2 hours tops. Then the sky growled, a piercing shriek tore through the distance, as if the air itself was being ripped apart. Kevin snapped his head up. Crimson clouds churned, spiraling into massive vortexes, a magnetic storm, Orion 9's signature killer. Before he could react, a wave of energy slammed across the plain, shaking the ground beneath his boots. Boom! His shuttle erupted in flames. Weird, blue-green fire roared from the engines, spreading fast, fueled by something unseen. Kevin lunged forward, but a secondary blast hurled him back, slamming him into the dirt. "Sparky, status," he barked, red dust coating his visor. "Shuttle's toast, boss," Sparky replied, voice warping. "Systems fried by magnetic interference. Recommendation, find shelter, pronto, before this storm swallows us whole." Kevin clenched his jaw, staring at the smoldering wreck that was his ticket home. Beyond it, the spiral forest emerged through the haze. Twisted, alien trees walked, as if crushed by an unseen fist. No options left. He grabbed his toolbox, spun on his heel, and bolted toward the trees. Wind howled past his ears, carrying the storm's furious roar. Sparky piped up again, absurdly chipper. "Don't sweat it, boss. I've seen you dodge worse explosions. Or have I?" Memory's a little scrambled. Kevin didn't answer. One truth burned clear in his mind. Orion 9 had just thrown down the gauntlet, and he wasn't about to lose. The enigmatic encounter. The magnetic storm still howled in the distance, but the spiral forest had already swallowed Kevin whole. Gnarled trees stretched upward like skeletal fingers, twisting into bizarre shapes under the flickering, crimson-orange light. The wind screeched through the leaves, a mournful wail like a dying machine. Kevin's breaths came heavy, his legs leaden in the envirosuit. The toolbox slung over his shoulder clanked against a trunk, the dry thud echoing in the eerie stillness. "Sparky," he rasped, voice rough with dust. "Found a shelter yet?" A buzz crackled through his earpiece. Scanning, boss. There's a big structure 200 meters east. Stable temp, no large life signs. Well, unless they're cloaked, I wouldn't rule that out. Kevin frowned. Cloaked? Don't talk nonsense. But Sparky wasn't joking. As he pushed through a gap in the trees, a massive silhouette loomed ahead. It was an ancient temple, or something like it. Grey stone walls glowed with luminous moss, etched with swirling symbols that pulsed like living circuits. A towering door stood ajar, beckoning yet ominous. Kevin halted, fingers tightening around his toolbox handle. This isn't in the Coalition's logs, he muttered. What the hell is it? Before Sparky could chime in, a faint sound broke the silence. Not the wind, but soft, almost silent footsteps. Kevin spun around, heart pounding. Then, from the forest's shadows, it emerged, an Elthar. The creature was a living nightmare. Its skin shimmered like shattered glass, reflecting the planet's red glow, rendering it nearly invisible. Only as it moved did Kevin catch the skeletal legs, scythe-like claws, and a jagged maw bristling with razor teeth. A low growl rumbled through the air, vibrating in his chest. "Sparky!" he shouted, stumbling back. "Ideas now. Run, boss, or fight. Odds of surviving a sprint, 33%. Fighting, less than that. No time to think." The Elthar lunged, a blur of unseen lightning. Kevin yanked open his toolbox, grabbing a small generator, his go-to for circuit tests. He cranked the dial and unleashed a magnetic pulse into the air. Boom! The blast shook the atmosphere. The Elthar's shimmer faltered, revealing its grotesque form in full. It shrieked, staggered, then fled into the dark. Kevin exhaled, hands trembling. "That's how humans roll," he said, steadying himself. Brains over brawn, but before he could bask in the win, a voice cut through the silence. Low, sharp, and icy. "Who are you?" Kevin whipped around. Before him stood a woman. No, not quite human. Her hair flowed white as moonlight, her violet eyes blazing in the gloom. A tattered armored suit clung to her, highlighting a warrior's frame. Beside her was a small boy, wide-eyed but blank, silent as a ghost. "I'm Kevin Varon," he answered, wary. "You?" "Amelia," she said, her gaze piercing. "This is Kyle, my son. We're hiding." "From who?" Kevin pressed, but before she could reply, she pointed to a device on the stone floor. A comm unit, its circuits eerily familiar, straight out of Coalition tech. "Can you fix it?" Amelia asked, urgency in her tone. Kevin squinted, curiosity flaring like a spark. "Maybe, but I need answers first." Amelia met his stare, her violet eyes flashing. "Help us, and I'll tell you. Hurry, they're closing in." He didn't know who they were, but the way she gripped Kyle's hand told him one thing. He'd just stepped into something far bigger than a routine repair job. Inside the ancient temple, the air hung heavy, thick with the weight of 1,000 forgotten years. Kevin trailed Amelia through narrow corridors, the swirling symbols on the stone walls casting dancing lights across his envirosuit. The storm's wind howled faintly outside, muffled as if buried beneath the dense rock. He stole a glance at Amelia, her violet eyes locked forward, unyielding, her hand gripping Kyle's as if he might vanish into thin air. Kevin still didn't know who they were, but the tension in her every move screamed one truth. Time was running out. "Come on," Amelia said, her voice low but razor-sharp. "It's down below." "What's it?" Kevin asked, but she didn't answer. Instead, she led him down a steep stone stairwell, plunging into darkness so thick it seemed alive, swallowing each step they took. They emerged into a vast chamber, and Kevin froze, his breath catching in his throat. At the center stood an otherworldly object, a crystal as tall as he was, pulsing with a faint blue glow like a heartbeat. Its surface gleamed smooth, but inside intricate swirls moved, slowly, like memories trapped in a frozen tide. "The memory crystal," Amelia murmured, almost a whisper. It holds the soul of my people, what's left of our golden age. Kevin squinted, stepping closer. Is this some kind of organic AI? I've never seen anything like it. He reached out, but Amelia seized his wrist, halting him. Don't, she warned. It'll show you, but only if I allow it. She pressed her palm against the crystal. A burst of light flared, and images flooded Kevin's mind. Not on a screen, but etched straight into his thoughts. He saw cities floating among crimson clouds, colossal machines marching across the earth, a dazzling Orion civilization in its prime. Then darkness crashed in, a mysterious race, towering figures clad in black armor, swept through, bringing fire and ruin. The civilization crumbled, leaving ashes and ruins like this temple behind. Kevin staggered back, reeling. What happened to them? We lost, Amelia said, her voice bitter. But I won't let Kyle share that fate. She pointed to the comm device on the stone floor, the one he'd seen earlier. It can signal our last orbital station, but it needs more power. Can you fix it? Kevin knelt, cracking open his toolbox. I'll give it a shot. But it's Coalition tech. How'd you get your hands on it? Amelia's gaze flickered away, evasive. Before he could press her, Kyle stepped forward. Wordless, the boy pointed a small hand at a scorched circuit, a flaw Kevin had missed. He checked it, and sure enough, the kid was right. Sharp eye, Kevin said, flushing a rare grin. This little guy's got a better knack for this than me. Kyle didn't reply, but his eyes brightened faintly. The first hint of life Kevin had seen in him. Sparky, silent until now, crackled through the earpiece. Kid's smarter than I was when I was fully functional. Well, maybe I never was, but you get me, right? Kevin chuckled, a strange warmth creeping in. He looked at Amelia. All right, I'm in. But I need to know, what are we up against? She turned away, her violet eyes glinting in the dark. An enemy not just ours, she said, but maybe yours too. And then from the distance, a sound rang out, metal clashing, cold and ominous. The clang of metal was no longer a distant murmur. It was close now, sharp, cold, and dripping with menace. Kevin spun around, the unfinished comm device still clutched in his hands. The memory crystal flickered behind him, its glow a fading beacon, no longer a sanctuary. Amelia shot to her feet, her violet eyes blazing like twin flames. She yanked Kyle close, her voice a guttural snarl. They've found us. Who? Kevin demanded, but before she could answer, the stone door above the stairs shuddered. A deafening blast ripped through the air, smoke and dust billowing in its wake. Shadows emerged from the gloom, not Orion, not human. Alien mercenaries, towering and brutal, their high-tech armor glinting like polished steel. Drones buzzed overhead, predatory insects of metal hissing with menace. Sparky, Kevin barked, stepping back. Analyze them. A7 grade armor, energy weapons, heat-scanning drones, Sparky buzzed, voice crackling. Survival odds in a straight fight, 9%, I'd say run, boss. Amelia didn't hesitate. She grabbed Kyle's hand and bolted for a narrow passage behind the memory crystal. Follow me, she commanded. Kevin shoved the comm device into his toolbox and sprinted after her. Heavy boots thundered behind them, red energy bolts sizzling into the stone walls, showering the air with debris. They plunged into an ancient cave, a deep, damp tunnel where glistening droplets sparkled on the ceiling. Kevin's suit light swept across the walls, revealing faint carvings of a lost era. But there was no time to marvel. A drone screeched in pursuit, its red beams slicing through the tight space. Down here, Amelia shouted, pointing to a low gap. The three slid through, tumbling into a smaller chamber. At its center stood a bizarre machine, 3 meters tall, forged from gleaming black metal, its faintly glowing conduit snaking along its frame. A chill emanated from it, as if it were alive, breathing. The blood engine, Amelia said, her voice trembling. It can drain my life force to generate power, enough to fire up the comms. Kevin stared at her, then at the machine. You mean sacrifice yourself? No way in hell, we'll find another option. There is no other option, Amelia snapped, her eyes flashing. They'll take Kyle if we don't act. Before Kevin could argue, the air hummed with a strange vibration. Tiny specks of light began to fall from the cave's ceiling, a magnetic rain from Oria 9's charged belts. They shimmered like miniature shooting stars, but each impact sparked a tiny explosion rocking the chamber. Sparky, what's happening? Kevin yelled, shielding Kyle from falling rubble. Magnetic rain, Sparky replied. High-energy particles, gorgeous but deadly, could fry your gear if you're not careful. Kevin eyed the machine, then the rain. A spark of inspiration flared. What if we channel this energy into the blood engine? No one has to die. Amelia shook her head. It's unstable. You'll kill yourself trying. Humans didn't survive millennia by giving up, Kevin said, forcing a grim smile. He yanked cables and a converter from his toolbox. I'll make it work. Just keep those bastards at bay. But then the drone's whine pierced the air again. A red beam swept the cave and a cold voice boomed through a speaker. Hand over the kid or you will die. Kevin's grip tightened. This wasn't just about fixing a machine anymore. It was a fight for survival. The mercenaries' threat still echoed through the cave, but Kevin had no time to fire back a retort. The magnetic rain kept falling, tiny glowing specks crackling around them, filling the air with the acrid tang of scorched metal. He turned to Amelia, cables still clenched in his grip. We've got to get out before they block every exit. Amelia nodded, her violet eyes flashing with resolve. She pulled Kyle tight and led them sprinting through a narrow escape hatch behind the bloody engine. Drones whined in pursuit, but the cave trembled. Blasts from the energy rain collapsed chunks of the ceiling, sealing off the chase. They burst onto the surface, Oria 9's crimson-orange air hitting Kevin's lungs like a fist. But relief, was it a luxury they didn't have? From the spiral forest's shadows, a squad of mercenaries emerged, swift, precise, and merciless. They didn't open fire. Instead, a drone swooped in, unleashing a sizzling green energy net. Kevin shoved Amelia and Kyle aside, but the net grazed his shoulder, numbing his left arm. He crashed to the ground, teeth gritted against the pain. Kevin, Amelia cried, but before she could move, a towering mercenary stepped forward. Clad in glossy black armor, his face hidden behind a mask, he gripped a glowing red energy rifle. Silent, he wrenched Kyle from Amelia's arms. The boy thrashed, but no sound escaped his mute lips. Kyle, Amelia roared, lunging like a wild beast. A bolt from the rifle grazed her shoulder, knocking her down. Kevin struggled to rise, but his arm hung useless. Take me, he shouted at the mercenary. I'm a coalition engineer. I'm worth more than the kid. The figure turned, his voice a frigid hiss through the mask. We don't need you. With a gesture, the mercenaries retreated, dragging Kyle into the forest's gloom. The drone's hum faded, leaving a crushing silence. Amelia slammed her fist into the dirt, blood seeping from her wound. Oh, we have to save him, now. She staggered up, but Kevin grabbed her arm, pulling her back. Charging in is suicide, he said, voice steely. They've got weapons, drones, and numbers. We need a plan. She yanked free, fury blazing. In her eyes, you don't get it. Kyle's all I have left. I do, Kevin replied, his tone softening. But rushing to die isn't how humans roll. We'll get him back, smarter than them. He turned to his gear, picking up a fragment of the drone's energy net. Scanning it with his handheld device, a symbol flickered onto the screen. Not alien script, but the Galactic Coalition's logo. Kevin froze, his mind spinning. Sparky, he called, voice trembling. Confirm this. Is this our tech? Yep, boss. Sparky crackled. A12 energy net made at Epsilon Station. But it's modded. Upgrades not in the database. Someone's been tinkering. Kevin locked eyes with Amelia, his loyalty to humanity wavering. You said the enemy might be ours too. This what you meant? The Coalition hunting you? Amelia sighed, pain clouding her gaze. Not all humans, just the greedy ones, willing to sell out the galaxy for power. Kevin clenched his fists. If the Coalition was in on this, he wasn't just stranded on Oria 9, he was caught in a war's crosshairs. Then he glanced at the temple, its faint symbols still glowing. "There," he said, pointing. "I saw a machine in the crystal's memories, something big enough to turn the tables. If we activate it, we can take them down and save Kyle." Amelia stared, doubt mingling with hope. "You sure?" "No," Kevin said, a faint smirk breaking through. "But humans excel at making the impossible happen." And in the forest's shadows, the storm's roar rose again, a harbinger of the battle to come. The magnetic storm roared across Oria 9's sky as if the planet itself dared them to falter. Kevin led Amelia back to the ancient temple, his steps heavy but unwavering. The crimson-orange air clung thick around them, magnetic dust swirling like invisible serpents. His left shoulder throbbed from the energy net's bite, but he shoved the pain aside. Kyle was out there somewhere, and every second that ticked by stabbed at his resolve. Amelia marched beside him, blood still seeping from her wound, yet her violet eyes now flickered with something beyond rage, a fragile spark of hope. "What machine are you talking about?" she asked, her voice hoarse with exhaustion. "Yet this one I saw in the memory crystal," Kevin replied, quickening his pace. "A war machine, big, powerful, forgotten. If it still works, those mercenaries are about to pay dearly." They stepped into a wider chamber within the temple ruins, its towering stone walls gnawed by time. And there, at the heart of it stood the Grey Giant, a colossal machine over 10 meters tall, forged from cold grey metal, draped in dust and withered vines. Its arms ended in massive blades, its chest housed a long dormant energy core. It loomed like a war god in slumber, awaiting its call to rise. Kevin stopped, craning his neck to take it in. "There it is," he whispered. "Your ancestors' weapon." Amelia approached, pressing a hand to its icy surface. A faint glow pulsed from her palm, then faded. She shook her head, bitterness lacing her voice. "I don't have the strength. My bioenergy's been drained dry." Kevin didn't answer right away. He cracked open his toolbox, pulling out a backup battery, laughably small next to the towering machine. "Sparky," he called, "what can we do with this?" A crackle buzzed in his earpiece. "That battery's barely enough to light a bulb, boss, but pair it with the memory crystal and you might jolt this thing awake. Odds of success, 27%. Failure means, well, we go boom." "Perfect," Kevin said, flashing a wry grin. He turned to Amelia. "Can you grab that crystal?" She nodded, darting back to the previous chamber. When she returned, the memory crystal flickered faintly in her hands, teetering on the edge of death. Kevin wired the battery to the crystal with careful precision, then linked it to the Grey Giant's core, his hands moving fast, a testament to years spent thriving in tight spots. "Sparky, calculate the current," he ordered. "Trying, boss," Sparky replied, "but fair warning, my systems are 60% fried. Screw this up and you're ash before you can blink." "Then don't screw up," Kevin growled. He twisted the final knob. A surge of electricity raced through the cables, slamming into the crystal. A fierce blue light erupted, flooding the machine's core. Rumble, the Grey Giant shuddered, its metal eyes flared blood red. A grating screech of steel echoed as it rose, proud and terrifying. Amelia stepped back, awestruck. "You did it," she breathed. Kevin stood, wiping sweat from his brow. He met her gaze. "Humans don't quit easy," he said, voice ironclad. "Now let's go get Kyle back." But from the distance, the drone's shrill whine pierced the air, a grim reminder that the hunt was far from over. The drone's shrill buzz sliced through the dust-choked crimson air like a swarm of metal wasps. The grey giant loomed tall amid the temple ruins, its blood-red eyes piercing the darkness. Kevin clambered into the control pod, a cramped chamber nestled in the machine's chest, packed with dust-caked buttons and levers untouched for millennia. He gripped the controls, the cold steel's vibrations humming through his fingers. Below, Amelia looked up, her violet eyes glinting with trust, tinged with dread. "Let's roll," Kevin said through the machine's speakers, his voice thundering like a storm. "Time to show them humans don't break easy." He shoved the lever forward. The grey giant lurched into motion, each step shaking the earth, rubble cascading in its wake. Amelia darted alongside, slipping into the spiral forest's shadows, toward the mercenaries' lair, a makeshift metal outpost shimmering with the glow of energy weapons. Kevin aimed straight for it, the machine's massive arms rising, blades gleaming under the crimson sky, but the enemy wasn't about to roll over. A flock of drones swarmed in, unleashing searing red beams at the grey giant. They struck its left shoulder, sparks flying, but the ancient metal held tougher than Kevin expected. He gritted his teeth, swinging the right arm down hard. A drone shattered into jagged shards, raining iron onto the ground. "Sparky," he yelled, "get me a fix on these drones." "My systems are down to 40%, Sparky crackled back. "But I've got their control signal, hack it, and they'll turn on their masters. Odds of pulling it off, 15%. "Good enough," Kevin growled. He yanked his handheld scanner from the toolbox, jacking it into the control panel. His fingers danced across the keys, cracking the drone's code. Numbers flickered wildly on the screen, then, beep, he was in. "Turn around, you bastards," he roared. The drones froze mid-air, their red lights blinking in panic. Then, as if seized by a new will, they pivoted, diving straight into the mercenaries. Explosions erupted, red and green light clashing as the drones self-destructed, dragging a handful of soldiers down in a blaze of smoke and fire. Then the sky ignited. A sudden energy rain poured from the magnetic belts, tiny, radiant flecks like 1,000 shooting stars, beautiful but deadly. Each one burst into miniature fires on impact. The heavens blazed, turning the battlefield into a chaotic tapestry of light and shadow. Kevin drove the grey giant forward, smashing through the outpost's metal wall. The crash of steel drowned out the storm's roar. Meanwhile, Amelia had slipped in from the rear. She wove through the haze, clutching a short, glowing Orion blade, a relic of lost tech. She found Kyle in an energy cage, his eyes lighting up at the sight of her. She shattered the bars, pulling him free, but a mercenary loomed behind. Bolt of energy slammed into her back. "Kyle, run!" she shouted, shoving him toward the giant silhouette. She collapsed, blood pooling on the red earth. Kevin saw it through the pod's viewport. "Amelia!" he cried, voice breaking. He slammed the giant's fist down, crushing the shooter flat. Kyle scrambled up the machine's leg, clawing toward the pod. Kevin threw open the hatch, hauling him in and holding him tight. "We did it," he whispered, but his gaze stayed locked on Amelia, motionless below. Sparky piped up, oddly chipper. "Told you you'd pull it off, boss. 8% odds and all. Now, save her." But the fight wasn't over. From the outpost's wreckage, an engine roared, a smaller, nimbler mercenary machine charging toward them. Kevin tightened his grip. This was humanity's moment to prove they didn't just survive, they conquered. The mercenary machine burst from the smoke, a metallic phantom streaking through the energy rain. Kevin held Kyle tight in the grey giant's control pod, his breaths coming fast and ragged. The enemy rig was smaller but agile, its spider-like, legs scuttled with precision, a glowing red energy cannon mounted on its right arm. A beam lanced out, striking the giant's left arm, snapping its massive blade in two with a tortured screech of metal. Kevin clenched his jaw, jerking the lever to dodge the next shot, but the ancient machine shuddered violently. "Sparky," he barked. "Power status?" "Cause it 12%. Sparky buzzed, voice thick with worry. We're on borrowed time, boss. One more hit and we're done. Kevin glanced down through the viewport. Amelia lay still on the red dirt, blood pooling around her. Kyle trembled in his arms, eyes locked on his mother. Rage flared in Kevin's chest like a wildfire. "No," he growled. "We're not finished yet." His gaze swept the mercenaries' shattered outpost. Amid the twisted wreckage, something caught his eye. A small reactor, glowing faint green, abandoned after the drone's meltdown. It wasn't much, but Kevin knew instantly it could shift the tide. "Kyle," he said, voice low but steady, "hold on tight. I'm bringing your mom back." He drove the grey giant forward, ignoring the control panel's blaring warnings. The enemy machine fired again, the beams slamming into the giant's chest, its core flashing red. But Kevin didn't flinch. He swung the right arm, scooping up the reactor, heat searing through the metal. Sparky patched into the core. He ordered, "You're insane, boss." Sparky yelped, "It's incompatible. 78% chance we blow sky high." "Then the other 22% is all I need," Kevin shot back, jamming the reactor's cables into the system. A green surge crackled through, the giant quaking fiercely. Its red eyes blazed one last time as Kevin slammed the lever full throttle. "Die!" he roared. The giant swung its arm wide, unleashing a sweeping blast. A colossal green wave erupted from the reactor, tearing the air apart. It engulfed the mercenary machine in a blinding explosion. The remaining soldiers were swept into a firestorm, vanishing in the crimson haze. The outpost collapsed entirely, leaving a blackened scar on the earth. But victory came at a cost. The reactor's unstable energy triggered a secondary blast within the giant's core. Boom! The pod lurched, the viewport shattering. A jagged shard of metal tore into Kevin's shoulder, punching through his suit. He slumped forward, blood soaking the floor. "Boss!" Sparky screamed, voice fading in the earpiece. Kyle grabbed Kevin's hand in panic, but strength drained from him. The grey giant teetered, then crashed down amid the rubble, smoke billowing thick and dark. Outside, Amelia dragged herself forward, arms trembling. She'd stirred awake, the energy rains, inexplicably easing her wounds. She saw the fallen giant and cried out, "Kevin, Kyle!" She hauled herself closer, forcing the pod's hatch open with her last ounce of will. Kyle tumbled out, throwing himself into her arms. She peered inside. Kevin lay still, blood pooling around him. With Kyle's help, she pulled him from the smoldering wreck. "You can't die," she whispered, voice choking. "Not after everything you've done." But Kevin didn't stir. His breath grew shallow, eyes shut tight. Around them, the storm growled on, as if waiting to see if humanity's fire would gutter out for good. Darkness enveloped Kevin, but it wasn't silent. The magnetic storm hissed faintly overhead, mingling with the crackle of scorched metal around the grey giant's wreckage. Amelia knelt beside him, her trembling hands pressed to his chest. Blood from his shoulders soaked the red earth, his breath so faint they barely stirred the air. Kyle clung to her arm, eyes glistening with unshed tears, voiceless in his plea. "You've done enough," Amelia whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I won't let you slip away like this." She drew a deep breath, her violet eyes flaring once more, not with fury, but with fierce resolve. Her hands hovered over Kevin's wound, murmuring strange, ancient words, a song rising from the depths of Orion memory. A soft purple glow spilled from her palms, seeping into his flesh. This wasn't magic, it was the lost science of her ancestors, a biotechnique that could jolt life back into cells using the planet's own energy. The energy rain still fell gently around them, tiny motes of light sinking into the soil, blending with the radiance from Amelia's hands. Kevin's body jerked, his chest heaving violently. A sharp gasp tore from his throat, and his eyes snapped open, wild with confusion. "What happened?" he rasped, voice rough as gravel. Amelia offered a faint, weary smile, pulling her hands back. "I dragged you back from the edge, but it came at a cost. Kevin sat up, his head spinning. Something felt off, not just the return of life but something deeper. A strange hum echoed in his mind, not words but a melody, like waves of memory from the crystal. He glanced around and for the first time he truly felt Aurea 9, the pulse of the earth, the storm's whisper, the ache of a dying world. "What did you do to me?" he asked, voice shaky. He pressed a hand to his chest, sensing an odd warmth beneath his skin. "My bioenergy fused with you," Amelia replied. "Not much, but enough to save you. You're not fully human anymore, Kevin Varan." Before he could process that, a crackle buzzed in his earpiece. "Congrats, boss," Sparky chirped, absurdly cheerful despite the distortion. "You just leveled up to alien hybrid." I'd clap, but no hands. Kevin laughed, a raw, pained sound, and the ache in his shoulder flared. He looked at Amelia, then Kyle, who now wore a small smile, the first since they'd met. "Thanks," he said, voice dropping low. "Both of you," Amelia shook her head. "You saved us. Without you, Kyle wouldn't be here." Kevin braced himself and stood, legs wobbly but holding. He gazed out where the mercenaries' lair lay in ashes. The storm had eased, leaving a crimson sky twinkling with the last flecks of energy. Yet a question gnawed at him. If the Coalition was behind this, what lay ahead? "We're not done yet," he said, tone firm. "But for now, we rest. Humans, or whatever I'm turning into, need a breather." Amelia nodded, resting a hand on Kyle's shoulder. The three stood there, amid the ruins, fragile sparks defying the vast darkness of the cosmos. The grey giant's wreckage lay silent beneath Aurea 9's sky, a monument to their unyielding will. Kevin stood tall, his shoulders still aching, but the new bioenergy coursing through him made him feel stronger than ever. Beside him, Amelia supported Kyle, her violet eyes softer now, stripped of the desperation that had haunted her hours before. The storm had faded, leaving a rare stillness. The crimson sky shimmered like a cosmic canvas, the last energy flecks drifting down like a meteor shower. But peace was a fleeting guest. A low rumble growled from the horizon, not the storm, but engines. Kevin looked up. A galactic Coalition rescue ship pierced the clouds, its white floodlights sweeping the spiral forest. It touched down nearby, hatch sliding open as a voice boomed through the speaker. "Engineer Kevin Varan, we've picked up your suit's signal. Prepare to board. Your mission on Aurea 9 is over." Kevin stared at the ship, his pulse quickening. It was a ticket home, to Earth, to familiar streets, to the life of an ordinary engineer. But then he turned to Amelia and Kyle. The boy gazed up at him, eyes bright, yet silent. Amelia gripped his hand, her voice steady, but low. "You don't owe us anything more. Go." Kevin shook his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I'm not staying out of debt," he said. "I'm staying because this is where I'm needed. Humans don't just survive, we build, we fight, we change the game. Aurea 9 isn't an endpoint, it's a beginning." Amelia studied him, surprise flickering in her gaze before melting into gratitude. "You're a strange one, Kevin Varan," she said. "But I'm damn glad you are." The rescue ship lingered a few minutes longer, but as Kevin stood his ground, its hatch sealed shut, engines roared, and it vanished into the clouds, leaving the trio amid the ravaged land. A cool breeze brushed past, the first time Kevin realized Aurea 9 wasn't just a death trap, but a world brimming with potential. Then another sound broke, the quiet. From the nearby rubble, the memory crystal, used to awaken the grey giant, flared to life, not the familiar hum, but a sharp, repeating pulse, like a warning carved from the past. Kevin stepped closer, pressing a hand to its surface. The noise sharpened in his mind, not words, but visions, towering figures in black armor, the scourge that raised the Orions millennia ago. They hadn't vanished, they were waking. "Sparky," Kevin called, voice taut. "What do you hear?" Alien signal, boss. Sparky buzzed. Nothing in coalition records, but if I'm guessing right, something's coming, and it ain't friendly. Kevin faced Amelia. What do you know about this? Before she could answer, a faint boom echoed from afar. A white streak tore through the clouds, not a coalition ship, but a sleek, black orb, its angular edges like a gem honed by darkness. It slammed into the spiral forest miles away, the ground quaking beneath them. Sparky, Kevin snapped. Analyze it? Systems at 30%, Sparky crackled. Not coalition or Orion tech. High heat, weird energy signature. I bet it's tied to those black armored bastards from the crystal. Kevin turned to Amelia. You called them your ancestors' nightmare. Who are they? She shook her head, eyes darkening. I don't know. But if they're back, we're not ready. Not yet. Kevin glanced at the distant crash site, smoke rising from the impact. The bioenergy in him thrummed, as if reacting to the newcomer. Humans don't wait to get wiped out, he said, voice like steel. If it's an enemy, we'll find a way to crush it, just like before. Kyle pointed toward the forest, worry lighting his eyes. Kevin rested a hand on his shoulder. Don't be afraid, he said. We'll face it together. But deep down, a question swelled. Was this the dawn of a new war, one even human grit might struggle to overcome?